Horror stories in southern Chile. The Llorona, the terrifying legend haunting a Chilean town.
In a small village in Chile, where the winds whisper ancient secrets and the trees seem to bow under the weight of forgotten stories, the legend of La Llorona has persisted for generations. In that place, where reality and fantasy intertwine in a sinister embrace, a story is born that awakens the deepest fear in the hearts of those who hear it. The legend of La Llorona begins with Rosalia, a woman of captivating beauty, daughter of an indigenous lineage. In a time when Spanish colonizers arrived in Chilean lands, Rosalia fell deeply in love with one of them, a handsome and seductive man. Together, they created a life full of love and promises, and from their union, 2 beautiful children were born. However, Rosalia's happiness was eclipsed when her beloved decided to abandon her. Driven by prejudice and the pressures of his society, he chose to marry a Spanish woman of high lineage. Betrayal and abandonment fell upon Rosalia like a hurricane, tearing her heart apart and shattering her soul. Desperation and pain consumed her, leading her into a state of uncontrollable madness. In her desperate attempt to find redemption and peace, Rosalia made a fateful decision. Under the pale light of the moon, she took her children in her arms and headed towards the nearby river, a place where dreams and nightmares intertwine. Rosalia's crying was heartbreaking as she dragged them into the river, their little voices pleading for mercy. The cold and murky water engulfed them, forever silencing their laughter and childish whispers. Realizing the horror she had committed, Rosalia felt the overwhelming weight of her act, and in a final attempt at redemption, she threw herself into the river, letting its waters become her grave. Since that tragic day, the presence of Rosalia, known as La Llorona, became palpable in the village. Her ethereal figure, dressed in white, emerged from the shadows on full moon nights. Her face, marked by suffering and madness, evoked an ancestral fear in all those who crossed paths with her empty and piercing gaze. La Llorona wandered tirelessly, her heartbreaking wails resonating in the nocturnal winds. Her cries mingled with the whisper of the leaves and the murmur of the waters, creating a melody of anguish that enveloped the village in an eternal shiver. As the legend spread, fear clung to the hearts of the inhabitants, fueling obsession and curiosity to uncover the truth behind the tragedy. A curious young man, Juan, approached Pedro with fear in his voice and asked,
"Is it true, Pedro? Does La Llorona really exist?"
Pedro, with a somber look, replied,
My friend, the line between reality and legend is blurred in these lands. The testimonies of those who have encountered La Llorona are countless. Her wails have been heard by the bravest, and her empty eyes have left indelible marks on their souls.
Maria, a shiver running down her spine, added,
But what does La Llorona seek? Why does she take the children?
Pedro sighed before responding.
It is said that Rosalia seeks eternal redemption, that she tries to fill the void her horrendous act created. Disobedient or mischievous children are her targets, as if she were trying to replace the children she lost. But be cautious, Maria, for those who dare defy her, those who seek to uncover the truth, often face a cruel fate.
The young ones looked at each other, a mixture of fear and intrigue in their eyes. The legend of La Llorona had come to life before them, and now they felt in their hearts the unfathomable darkness that enveloped the village. However, the presence of La Llorona was not limited to mere sightings. As time passed, her influence became more ominous and malevolent. It was said that her whispers in the night brought misfortunes and calamities. Crops withered, livestock mysteriously fell ill, and the spirits of those who dared defy her were haunted by indescribable nightmares. Fear took root in every corner of the village. Parents warned their children of the dangers of approaching the river at night, reminding them of the story of La Llorona as a sinister warning. The paths to the water became desolate and feared. And full moon nights became a test of bravery for those who ventured to confront the myth. As the legend spread, darkness took hold of the hearts of the village inhabitants. Fear and intrigue intertwined, fueling an insatiable curiosity to uncover the truth behind the story. But as that curiosity grew, so did the danger, and those who delved too deep into the search for answers found themselves facing a destiny as tragic as Rosalia and her children. Today, in the small village in Chile where the legend of La Llorona took deep root, fear and intrigue still linger. The whispers and laments persist in the dark nights, reminding everyone that there are forces beyond human comprehension, forces that can unleash horror and misfortune if awakened. So beware, unsuspecting traveler, if you ever venture into the lands where La Llorona whispers. Listen to her lament in the night breeze, feel the shiver run down your spine, and remember that some stories, though they may seem like mere tales of terror, can have a thread of truth entwined with the deepest darkness of the night.
Por favor, apóyame, dame like y suscríbete. Gracias.